that would be a big mitzvah because we are looking for hosts.
Susan, do you have a text? Where can I reach you? What is your text or email? Is it
my email is snanus@wbtla.org. Everybody is wbtla.org. snanus, Nanus.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if anybody wants to do that, please let me know. Okay. So, hi everyone. I want to talk to you. Let's start with a bracha because it's so great to study Torah with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. There are 17 people in this class. Only we have less of you showing, so I'd love people to turn on their cameras because we love for you to ask questions or whatever. However, today we're going to talk about the only woman Hasidic Rebbe that we know of. We talked about the first rabbi last week. She was Sephardic. She was Asnat Barzani, lived in Mosul, Iraq. And this week it is a woman named Rochel Werbemacher. But before we talk about her, I think it would be good just to make sure to just review, and I'm going to put it up on the share. What is the Hasidic? What is Hasidism? What do Hasidim believe, and why is being a Hasidic Rebbe such a big deal, as opposed to a rabbi? A big deal, but a Rebbe is even a bigger deal. So I'm going to share. Hold on, my screen. Here it is. Okay, now where are people? Okay, so hold on, and we're going to talk just a little bit about what it, what it believes and where it started. They call it Hasidic Judaism, and it's a spiritual revivalist movement. So most people don't realize that it was a spiritual revivalist movement. And it drew heavily on the Jewish mystical tradition and seeking a direct experience of God through ecstatic prayer and other rituals conducted under the spiritual direction of a Rebbe, which is a charismatic leader, also known as a tzaddik or a righteous man. Well, they're saying man. So I want to go down to the beginning here of the Hasidic Judaism's beginnings and just read a little bit about that and the Baal Shem Tov. So, because there's a parallel between our woman Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov in some aspects. So I want you to know that. So who would like to read a couple paragraphs?
I'll read.
Okay, go ahead.
Hasidic Judaism first arose in Ukraine amid a wider resurgence of interest in Jewish mysticism and as an alternative to those who hewed to more formal and scholarly approach to Jewish practice, and would later become known as
Mitnagdim,
literally opponents. Thank you.
The word Mitnagdim comes from the word neged, which means against. So after Hasidic Judaism started, there was another group called the Againsters. What happened? We're against. So, and they were a very big group as well. Okay, keep one more, Donna.
Okay, born in 1700, the founder of Hasidim was Rabbi Israel ben
Eliezer,
better known as the Baal Shem Tov, literally master of the good name, and sometimes referred to by the Hebrew acronym the Bishi.
The Besht.
That's right. I have no idea. Little of the Baal Shem Tov biography has been firmly established by historians, but stories of his charismatic leadership and skills as a miracle worker became entrenched in Hasidic lore.
So he was considered the good name. When we say master of the good name, what name? It doesn't mean you have a good reputation, you have a good name. It means the name of God, that he knew some of the secret names of God. And with that, he could perform miracles. He could foretell the future. He could actually, they say his soul could go up to the next world, the realms, and he could tell what was going on. Like he could say, I know our prayers haven't been accepted yet. I've been, he was a mystical leader. Okay.
Wow.
Keep going. Unlike
Worker became entrenched in Hasidic lore. Unlike the prominent rabbis of the day who were renowned for their Talmudic scholarship, the Baal Shem Tov worked as a school teacher and a laborer and was known to spend long stretches of time meditating and wandering in the woods.
So he used to walk through the woods and meditate. It was like he was hiding. They say he was hiding his power and his knowledge, and everybody thought he didn't even teach that much. He led the children to school and took them back. He was like the babysitter kind of the children, and he wandered in the woods. And then at a certain point, he went into a little cabin, and all this fire and light came out of him, and he started teaching. And here I'm going to talk to you about this. The Baal Shem Tov traveled widely and developed a devoted following. And instead of talking, he was all about developing a personal relationship with God and the importance of dveikut, which means clinging to. In adhesion, they say, but it's like clinging to, referring to a mystical state of connection with God that could be achieved by unifying the spiritual and material realms. So he was all about living in this life, but clinging and connecting to the spiritual world. Then they talk about all his followers. Okay, but we want to look at really how is it different than other kinds of Judaism? Because, the thing that people forget, there were multiple strands of Judaism all the time, even in Talmudic times, in ancient Israel. And certainly Hasidic, we think of it as like the essence or the ultimate Judaism. Not true at all. Not true at all. It was a sect that became very, very popular because it didn't require Talmudic scholarship, though now, of course, they do study. But originally, it was for the simple people, the peasants, that were scorned by the rabbinic scholars and all the yeshiva scholars, that you too are holy, that God loves you, that you can connect to God, that you can elevate your soul by, yes, practicing Judaism, but by the spiritual behaviors and through your Rebbe. That was a big thing. But before we get there, let's look at the Hasidic practices right here, this one. So would somebody else like to read? Okay. Nadine, you want to read?
Where are you?
Hasidic practices. You see where my marker is right here? Right there.
Oh, let me find it on okay.
Right.
Hasidic practices were distinct from mainstream Judaism in a number of ways. Hasidism brought Jewish mysticism to the masses, something that had traditionally been kept somewhat secret and restricted to a pious and learned few. It de-emphasized Jewish study in favor of Jewish practice, particularly prayer, and embraced a culture of folktales that often had elements of magic and miracles. Hasidic Jews also rejected the traditional Ashkenazi prayer standards and embraced a version that drew from both Ashkenazi and Sephardic sources.
So they talked about prayer, they're singing, you've seen, they're singing, they're dancing, their ecstasy, is all, and that the Rebbe teaches and they listen. So it's all very emotional and spiritual. So that was, and you could see by there were the opposition, the Mitnagdim, they regarded Hasidic practices as heretics, completely heretical. And so it wasn't accepted, it was considered insane. They're those crazy Hasidim and it was too close to, they felt, the mysticism of Shabtai Tzvi, who lived in the 1600s, who was a false Messiah, who convinced everyone that he was the Mashiach, the Messiah, and he wasn't. So, and if you ever heard of the Vilna Gaon, the Gaon means the genius, the great one of the city of Vilna. He was a leader in Lithuania who opposed Hasidism very strongly. And then if you look further down in this interesting paragraph, it talks about in 1912, they united finally in 1912 from the 18th century to fight Zionism and secular Judaism, which would be Reform Judaism or even conservative Judaism, but Zionism they were against. And they're called Litvish from Lithuania, or Yeshivish Jews. They're parts of the Haredi Judaism. So these, and we know the ultra-Orthodox in Israel still don't recognize Israel as a state. They say that it can never be a country or a state until the Messiah comes. And they united against this. So nothing like your enemy's enemy makes you friends together. So I think that's fascinating that they were, Israel was like what they were all against. Okay, so then I want to just go a little further on this. So they had very unique practices, and I talked about the Rebbe, and he's the central thing. Every little dynasty or has his followers, and I got to be honest with you, my niece who became ultra-Orthodox in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She's not Hasidic, but she has a rabbi. She wasn't my rabbi, but he's like a Rebbe because she only follows what he says is kosher and allowed. He, like us, we'll go to this rabbi, that rabbi, we respect them all. This is her rabbi. And for example, when she lived in New York City, the Eruv, which is the sort of mythical boundary around the city, which allows Orthodox Jews to carry things. In other words, you're not allowed to carry things in the public square, including your child. You can't carry your child. You can't carry anything. But if you create sort of a mythical private square space, you can. And so Orthodox Jews, in LA, we have it too. It's called an Eruv. It's kind of like they say, these wires from these phone wires, they make like a space, and they say within that you can carry. Well, her rabbi from Michigan did not recognize the Eruv in New York. So even though she lived in New York, that was her rabbi, he didn't recognize it. So she, for the first year, could not leave her house on Shabbat because she couldn't take her little baby with her anywhere. I thought she was insane, personally. Now they moved to New Jersey. I said to her, does the rabbi recognize the Eruv in your Orthodox community in New Jersey? Yes. Okay. I mean, every rabbi in New York recognizes the Eruv, but the one from Michigan, and that's her rabbi. So the power of the Rebbe or the rabbi is very strong. Sometimes it goes from, father to son. The most famous Rebbe we know was Menachem Mendel Schneerson from Chabad. And but when he died, he had no children, and there is really no one that follows him anymore. So
Rabbi,
yes.
I just want to say that right here in our city, there's a congregation on Olympic and Doheny on the south side of the street. So many people pass it. It's called Beth Jacob. It's called Beth Jacob Congregation. They're a centrist Orthodox congregation, very large, a very central thinking, not at all super Orthodox, leaning centrally and maybe a little left, but not politically. They're still not politically left. They're very conservative. At any rate, they have a real Eruv put up with wires from Beverly Boulevard north to more south than Pico, and they actually have the wires up.
They have the wires up and they maintain it, and people donate.
They do, and people are allowed to walk in it carrying their babies, their baby carriages, their bottles, their diapers, their food. They carry a lot of things because they're within the Eruv.
That's
and
right.
I just want to ask one question.
Yes.
Did I hear you say that both the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim got together against Israel because of Zionism, that they were both anti-Zionist?
In 1912.
1912.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I wasn't sure I heard that correctly.
I know, I didn't know that till I was doing the research either. So we know what their clothing is, but what you may not know is that sometimes there are different variations Like in my neighborhood, if you wear a black velvet kippah, it means one level of observance. If you wear a knitted kippah, it's another level of observance. If you wear a fedora, it's another level of observance. If you wear a fur streimel, you know, those big fur hats that's another level of observance. So you can, I love it. Even among them, they have their different levels. And I also read, this is a while back, that among women, apparently your tablecloth tells you your level of observance. Like a lace tablecloth means one kind, and a plain cotton or linen tablecloth means something else. So, you know, then it's you know, very interesting. And some very few, you know, wear the ancient, like the Polish clothing of the stockings, the white stockings, but they all speak Yiddish, and they're all these different sects. And what I think is interesting is that there are 400,000 Hasidic Jews in the world today, and you know, the hugest group are in New York, probably in Israel, New York and Israel. So, and they represent 16% of the total Jewish population, according to 2011. They probably all represent more by now. So that's the Hasidic. How do I stop share? Okay.
Probably.
So that's Hasidism before we look at a woman Rebbe, because she had that same power, the only woman we know. We're going to look, but before I move on, are there any questions or comments about Hasidism that you would like to know? Yes, Merle.
I just had a question about your niece's rabbi that wouldn't recognize the Eruv in New York. Was it any Eruv or that particular Eruv?
That particular Eruv.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because he recognized the one when she moved to New Jersey.
Oh, so it was the same. Okay. I just was curious.
Yeah.
That poor mother.
Any other questions about Hasidism that you'd like to know? Okay. Also, they this isn't mentioned, but they incorporated a lot of Kabbalah into Hasidism, and so that whole idea of the next world and angels and, you know, all that mystical stuff is part of like Chabad and Kabbalah and everything, and they see significance in everything and meaning, and the idea that when you say a blessing or everything you do, every mitzvah you fulfill brings good into the world and all that, that's from Kabbalah. They incorporated all of that into Hasidism. Hasidism really is kind of a partly offshoot of Kabbalistic thinking, but it's more for the masses. Okay, so now this one I'm going to share with you is a paper that I wrote when I was in rabbinical school, when I found out there was this woman, Rebbe. And there was a book too that I read about her. It was a novel, but it was based on all the information. So I thought it would be interesting to look at this, because when I reread it yesterday, I went, wow, she was really interesting and unique. And unlike Asnat Barzani, there was pressure on her to stop being a Rebbe, because this is the Hasidic world. Even though she dazzled people, the male hierarchy couldn't accept it. And they tried to stop her and, you know, wanted her to go back to being, you know, a typical housewife. So we're not surprised by that. Here it is.
Hey, can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
About that? You know, it's funny. We have good family friends, and they happen to be they're Chabad Hasidic, and I know technically they're different. But when I said, you know, I'm thinking of becoming a rabbi, right away, oh, no, you can't be that, you can't do that.
That's right.
And that was the end of the discussion. Her husband had become a rabbi, not by profession. So I said, oh, you know, where did he study? I'd like to pursue that myself. Out of the question.
Yeah, out of the question for many reasons. One reason being that you have to read Torah to be a rabbi, and a woman is unclean when she has her menstruation, and so you don't want to ask her. So she's always considered, she's not allowed to touch the Torah. Women cannot even touch the Torah.
Yeah.
In Orthodox communities, you can't hold it. You can't read from it. You can't touch it because you might be unclean. Though, I have to say, what about postmenopausal women? What about them? I mean,
I was
That's
thinking
why we
that,
love
yeah.
Yentl so much. We love the movie Yentl so much.
exactly. So this is why Hannah Rochel Werbemacher is extraordinary for her time, and most people don't know her. So when I wrote this paper, I mentioned some of the other women that we have discussed before I got to Hannah Rochel. So I'm just going to read you this part, and then we're going to move on, and I'll ask you to read, and we'll talk about it. So their names were few and far between. One of the earliest is Bruria, which we talked about, wife of Rabbi Meir, and quoted as a sage in the Talmud in her own right. Bruria was great. Okay, we know Bruria. 3 more were Rashi's daughters, Yocheved, Miriam, and Rochel. They all put on tefillin and studied Talmud with their famous father. And Yocheved's 4 sons became the authors of Tosafot, which is another commentary after Rashi. Another was Adel, daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, considered a learned and holy woman, but we don't have any information, just this little amount. Considered a learned and holy woman, she followed in her father's footsteps after his death, giving advice and blessings to the public. Adel transmitted her vision of piety and scholarship to her daughter Fega, also a holy woman in her right, who gave birth and raised the child who would grow up to be Reb Nachman of Breslov. This was the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, a great mystic, a great teacher. There's a whole sect called the Breslovers from Breslov, and there's a big website about him. And he was quite an amazing guy. He was very mystical and kind. I'm going to move this over here so we can see this. Then we talked about Francesca Serra. We talked about her last week. And Fioretta of Modena. Okay. Jewish women, scholars, and mystics. Logic tells us that there must have been many more that we never heard of, and 10 times more than that who wanted to study and teach and were never allowed the opportunity. Perhaps those women poured their thwarted passion for study and scholarship into their sons and grandsons. We know that was true. Perhaps behind every great Torah scholar is a Jewish wife or mother whose love of learning was equally as great. Absolutely, they devoted themselves, and all these other women that we're mentioning were related to rabbis. Their father was a rabbi, their husband was a rabbi, so they were able to, get some knowledge through them. But Hannah Rochel was different. That was what makes Hannah Rochel Werbemacher such a unique and fascinating character. Not only did she become a great Torah and Talmud scholar, but she penetrated the male bastion of 19th century Hasidism to become an actual Rebbe with her own followers and a small court. Furthermore, she embodied all the qualities of a Hasidic tzaddik, as well as gaining fame as a wise and holy woman with the ability to perform miracles. So this is amazing and extraordinary. And so now we're going to read about her, and we're going to read it and talk about it because I think that the information is really interesting. So who would like to read something?
At my belly button.
Somebody like to read? Come on.
Sure.
Okay, what paragraph?
Well, somebody who hasn't read.
Okay, dear. Okay.
Hannah Rochel, right here.
I'm happy to read.
Okay, Aviva.
Where do I start?
Right here where it says Hannah Rochel was born.
Hannah Rochel was born in 1805 in the town of Ludomir in Ukraine to Hasidic parents. Her father, Manish, was a devout follower of the Rabbi Mordechai Tversky, the Maggid of Chernobyl. According to legend, before Hannah Rochel was born, Reb Yaakov Itzhak Halevi Horowitz, the seer of Lublin, predicted that Manish's barren wife would give birth to a child that would become a great rabbi. This child would be filled with the power of healing, guidance, and teaching. Upon hearing this, Rochel Werbemacher vowed to raise his child in the most sacred manner and prepare him, to become a greatest rabbi of his generation.
So what's interesting here is in that world, if you look, there was a Maggid and a seer. The seer of Lublin, the Maggid of Chernobyl. A Maggid was someone who told tales and gave answers and was considered very wise. But a seer was a person who could prophesy and see the future. So this was a world where mystical thinking and behavior was accepted in 1805 in the Ukraine. So she was kind of born right after the Baal Shem Tov. He kind of revealed himself in 1800. So the Hasidic movement was, she was a child when the Hasidic movement was taking off. And of course, that there was this prediction by that you would have a great rabbi for a child. Of course, they assumed it would be a son. So he had a girl. And so they meant, so I love it. Her father immediately interpreted the prophecy to mean she would marry a great rabbi because there's no way she could be the rabbi. But at age 6, Hannah Rochel was studying Torah, and a year later, she begged her father, to teach her Talmud. Okay, so she was astonishingly brilliant. She was supposed to be learning how to run a household and raise children and be a good Jewish wife. And so, but she wouldn't. Okay, so let's look at this. But Hannah Rochel was not like other girls right here. Who would like to read?
I will.
Okay.
But Hannah Rochel was not like other girls. If her father refused to study with her, she would study by herself. At age 9, she was teaching herself the Talmud. By the time she was 12, she had gained a reputation of being strange. Not only did she spend hours studying the Talmud, but when she was in the synagogue, she prayed with a fervor unmatched by any of the other girls or grown women for that.
For that matter. So when we see about, what did she do like the Baal Shem Tov in terms of meditation? There's a comparison here that she studied in the forest. He would walk in the forest, she would walk in the forest. And Reb Nachman, who lived after them both, this is the Baal Shem Tov's great-grandson, said that the best kind of prayer is to go out into the forest and sit in nature and pour out your heart to God. He gave it a name called Hitbodedut, which means kind of self-examination and loneliness, and that you would open your heart to God quietly and privately in the forest. So there's something.
Oh my God. I just wanted, may I share something, please?
Yes.
When I was a little girl in North Carolina in the forest, we had animals. We had a farm across the street. I would sneak across the street. I was 7 or 8 years old. I was not supervised, but the Lord was with me. And the bluebird would sit on my shoulders, the rabbit would be on my hand, the deer would come up, and I would be singing and talking to the animals. And I don't care if they think I'm out of my mind, but I did that, and I was praying to God. You said singing is a form of prayer, and singing is conversation with God. That's all I'm going to say about that.
It's beautiful. Okay, so the father was worried something was wrong with her. So keep reading, Merle.
Oh, wait a minute. I have to get back there. Hold on.
Worried and at his wit's end, right here.
Worried and at his wit's end, Hannah's father sought the advice of his Rebbe, the Maggid of Chernobyl. The Maggid offered to speak to Hannah Rochel himself, but when he did, he was stunned to discover how learned and knowledgeable the young girl was. He forced to admit that perhaps Hannah Rochel had the soul of a great Rebbe who had returned to the world to implement some repairs. This idea is based on Kabbalistic concept of
Ibur,
which believes that an elevated soul may enter the body of another in order to repair some minor flaws by participating in the positive actions of the lost soul.
Of the host soul.
Oh, host, I'm sorry.
So what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean? What's Ibur as you understand it? I'm curious. Let's take a pause for a second. What does that mean to you, Ibur, this concept of Ibur? Yes, Panina. You're muted.
Okay now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The word ubar is a fetus. And ibur, it's like you have a baby in you, like you have a ubar, ibur. If it's spelled with an ayin.
Yes. So there was this idea you could be a person, and this was a woman, and the soul could of another, a soul, not your own soul, could enter you like you're pregnant. You know, there's a second soul in you. And through your deeds, it's doing the last few repairs to its own soul so that it's perfected and doesn't have to ever be reincarnated again. So they're saying she might have the soul of a great Rebbe within her, a second soul. Of course, it couldn't be her, but there's a Rebbe within her, like a Dybbuk, but a good Dybbuk in a way. And through her deeds, this other soul is gaining, you know, perfection, repair, or whatever. So this is a Kabbalistic idea. Yes, Nadine.
But it's a man, right?
It's a male soul. Yes.
Right. So yeah. So there's still, you know, they don't want to accept the woman. They're going to get a male soul in there.
Exactly.
I'm with you, sister.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to say something about women in the world through history, that we don't have these rights to be a Rebbe, or we don't have the right to speak up and have our say. This is changing now. I'm going to start changing. I got this on.
Of course it's changing. Okay, so let's move on to like yes, Nina.
It's not entirely so. Because on Friday night, the first thing that's being sang at the table of all the Hasidim that I know, they sing Eshet Chayil Mi Imtza. Who is going to find a woman of valor? And they are praising the wife, and they recognize the contributions that she's contributing to the family, because actually that's why we are called Jewish if the mother is Jewish, because she's the one who teaches you. She's there all the time. So it's not that they were overlooked or overcome. I think it's this part came because of the society that they live in. It wasn't just the Jewish women that were overlooked. There's women all over the world. Because look at us. When did we get the right to vote? You know, in United States.
No, you're totally correct.
But
absolutely.
So I think
in her sphere,
Eshet Chayil Mi Imtza every Friday, and that's the man sings it to his wife.
But in her sphere, in her role, the woman is honored and respected. But to step out of her role, to want to be a scholar, to be a teacher, to, you know, study Talmud, to go deeper, that was not acceptable. Jennifer just had it happen like now. So in her sphere, but absolutely, they do sing a woman of valor. It's in the book of Proverbs. It says she extends her hand to the poor. She works. She does everything. And it's not like we're saying they didn't appreciate women, but they wanted to keep everybody in their own role. You know, conversely, there could not be a man probably who could do female tasks. It was very.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So let's go back now to.
Oh, wait, can I just add one thing?
Of course.
2 things, 3 things actually, but quick. First of all, can we get a copy of your essay?
Yes,
it's
on the
fascinating.
Website. It's
on the website.
It's on the.
Oh, great.
It's,
great. Okay. I'll find it. Yeah. And then I just 2 things. You know, hold on one second. I'll just go out. I wanted to say. You can get a really good portrait of Beria from the book by Milton Steinberg, A Driven Leaf.
Yes.
Probably already know that, everybody. And then thirdly, this helps me think of, I can't help but think of Virginia Woolf's book, you know, A Room of One's Own. If you've read that, where she posits, it's all about these brilliant creative women that had no outlet and she imagines Shakespeare having a sister equally as gifted, and she winds up throwing herself in front of the railroad tracks or something because she has no expressive outlet.
That, well, for sure. There were many women who were frustrated and not able to. Hold on, share. Okay. So we go to Okay. It was even so, we're right here. It was unacceptable for the Maggid that a female should be a great scholar. So he advised Rebbe, her father, to find his daughter a husband as soon as possible. And they arranged a marriage for her daughter to a childhood friend she had known for many years and was willing to marry. And this young man admired Hannah Rochel's love of learning, was happy to accept it. But he had to go away to a yeshiva for several years, so they were engaged before they could get married. And this made her even more lonely and deeper into her studies. So this is very important now, because this is how she was like the Baal Shem Tov. So who else would like to read? Who hasn't read? Nan, why don't you read? Right here. Are you there? You're there, right? Are you there, Nan, or did she leave?
I'll read.
Okay, go ahead.
It is interesting to note that, like the Baal Shem Tov, Hannah Rochel spent a great deal of time alone in the forests, meditating and communing with nature. She personally came to understand the Baal Shem's conception, that everything in the universe, both mind and matter, is a manifestation of the divine being. It was during this time, when Hannah Rochel was about 18, that she began to wish to share everything she had learned and discovered with others. She started to envision herself sharing her knowledge and insights with those who needed healing or who were
confused,
perplexed, and wrestling with issues of everyday life on both the mundane and holy planes.
So she came to understand this idea that everything is a part of God, everything is holy, it's all connected. This was a new idea. Don't forget the Baal Shem Tov only sort of came into being in 1800. So now it's 1805 plus 18, it's 1823. And she's understanding what he's saying, which still must have been a very radical idea of his time, and that she even learned it is amazing. Okay, just read one more paragraph.
It was the death of Hannah Rochel's father that transformed her life. Overcome with grief, Hannah Rochel visited her mother's grave, where she spent the night and had a transformational mystical experience. The next morning, she returned home and embarked on a path that she would follow for the rest of her life. She canceled her engagement, declaring that she had been given a new elevated soul and would never marry. From then on, she began to fulfill all the commandments that are obligatory only for men, wearing a talit and tefillin, and absorbing herself like a male pietist,
yes,
in intense study and prayer.
So she became a Hasid. She had some kind of experience. Her father died. She went to her mother's grave. She slept on her mother's grave, and she had kind of an experience. And she came back. And she said, I'm not getting married. I'm following this path. I'm going to be a complete Hasid. I have a new and elevated soul, and I'm different now. And she, at 18, that's pretty gutsy in a male society, in a small town in Lithuania, to decide to go on this path is a very strong, very spiritual, religious, holy woman, really. To feel that your calling is so powerful that you're going to defy all the norms, and all the leaders of your community.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Well, it seems to me, not only in this real life experience, but in fairy tales, invariably, it's the mother dies or the father dies that releases the younger person to realize themselves. It's as if this is what made it possible. The death of the parents freed her to actualize herself without constraint of obligation. She removed the obligation of being married. And I mean, if you see this pattern over and over again, what propels certain people to be able to go out into the community? And it's not that you want your parents to die,
Right.
but that somehow there's a use by date that really, or not really, but I'm just saying that there's something about this qualification that that is really, really significant in terms of how people go out into the public or make something of themselves if they've lost a parent at a certain window of age, not too young, not too old.
Well, she was 18. Yeah, 18.
So
Yes, Nadine.
if you have, in this case, a parent who is disapproving of what you did, that disapproval is taken away.
Right.
Now you're freed up.
Exactly.
So I think Stephanie,
Exactly.
that's very, very wise what you just said.
Yes.
But what you said is really true. And then, I think of Jung. Jung's father died, and it was assessed that this was helpful to him. His father was a very pious, very strict religious figure, and when he was gone, took that onus away. Really interesting. Think of John Lennon. A weird connection, but free of really his parents. And it he actually said, I think he had deficits as a result of that, but basically he said that he could then become his own person as he observed other people being so controlled by the vision of their parents. So it's very interesting.
Also, in that time, a daughter belonged to her father or her parents. A wife belonged to her husband. And she had this opportunity suddenly. She was 18. Maybe she inherited something. She must have inherited something. Usually this power is for widows because their husband died and they have something. But
that's it.
She had no one to control her for this time. Her disapproving, as you said, parent or whatever had freed her. Her mother had already died. She had this experience and she said, I'm not going to marry and then have to answer to anybody. I'm going to do what I want to do. But we'll see that it didn't last. They didn't like it and they tried to force her. Hold on. So, and then who would like to read? Nan, do you want to read? Okay. Sure. She began to live the life.
She began to live the life of a true Hasid, focusing on elevated sincerity and
Dveikut,
cleaving to God, in her spiritual and ritual practices and her dealing with people in everyday life. She gained a reputation as a learned and holy woman, and soon people came to her door seeking advice and spiritual direction. Hannah Rochel finally had people with whom she could share her learning.
Okay, read one more. Now, this was her unique philosophy, and I want to talk about if you think this is a female ideal. Go ahead.
The core of Hannah Rochel's teaching was directed at the eternal gift of self, which few dared to open during a lifetime. She reasoned that if you could not love yourself and who you are, then how can you love another? And if you cannot accept yourself and the gift of God that is within you, then how will you accept it in others? Many people came to her to pour out their problems because she was not condemning or judgmental. Instead, Hannah Rochel gave them the benefit of the doubt, reminding them that everyone is human and fallible, and motivating them to improve for tomorrow rather than mourn over yesterday. She used stories, parables, teachings, and quotations from the Torah and Talmud to instruct and inspire those who sought her out. That's kind of like Martin Buber. If I'm not for myself, then who?
No, that's Hillel.
Hillel.
But it's more this idea, which she must have been practicing on herself. Mm-hmm. You have to accept yourself, that you are, a piece of God, that you have holiness, and that at the same time you're fallible and you can make mistakes and you can repair yourself, which I feel is very maternal. It's not punishing. It's not, you did wrong. It's more accepting. It's very loving. And it seems to be very unique to her. Nadine, you're nodding. So what are you thinking?
No, I agree with you. I think I think it's true for all people, for male and female. I think that the way this is put, the way you've put it, it's really, it is very feminine, or we see it more in women. And I think we see in women the desire to bring together and to connect in a different way that men do.
Lori.
Well, it also seems like a very modern concept to me. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of psychology is based on this, that you have to know yourself before you can, share what you have inside of you to someone else. It seems very, well, it must have been very uplifting, but I also see it as a very modern concept. And it's like amazing how long it's lasted.
Like the sister that we all want to be, right? The sister we want to have and the one that we want to be for everyone else.
Yes.
Love and
it's a different model of leadership than a male model of leadership. It's more intimate. It's not remote and high above. And even though she was a Rebbe, she seemed to be able to be accessible or, close. And you think about the difference even today. I mean, it's changed, but women rabbis and what they brought to Judaism is very different than when it was just all males. So there's a place for both and a balancing of that. Yes, Penina. You're muted.
Now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We are looking at the 10 Commandments for a minute. And on the commandment that says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha.
Yes.
We're supposed to honor them.
Translate that for people.
Honor your father and your mother.
Right.
That's in the 10 Commandments.
Right.
But the word kabed means heavy also from the word kaved.
Yes.
So it means that when you honor, it's not just a word. You're supposed to actually care for them and take care of them the same way. You're supposed to carry the load of having them go older than you and literally wash them, wash their feet, do everything. Why? Because your kids are going to look at you, and when your parents pass away and you get old, they learn what you did and they'll do the same for you. So that's supposed to be, when I ask my students which one they thought it was the most important commandment in the 10 Commandments, the kids that had a deep vision and feeling said this is the one that they thought was the most important one.
So how does this connect to Hannah Rochel being a woman?
I think that it says we're supposed to give them the same respect as men. Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha.
But as a mother, not as a Rebbe. I mean,
they didn't say that. They didn't say not as a Rebbe.
Your mother. It says honor your mother.
Well, your mother could be a Rebbe. Your mother could be whatever.
Could be. Okay, so let's look at, because we only have a few minutes. We may have to continue some of this next week. And before we move on, I don't have any rush to end this and then not complete the discussion. But here's the part that's really interesting. So then she actually became a Rebbe and she had a shul. So Jill, do you want to read?
Sure.
Here, right here, in time.
Thank you. In time, Hannah Rochel became as revered as any other Hasidic Rebbe. She bought a little house in the forest, which became known as the Green Shul, where she began to conduct Sabbath prayer services and give sermons. She received audiences, accepted kvitlach prayer request notes, and presided over a tish, the traditional Sabbath meal in the company of one's Hasidim, at which she'd offer Torah readings and pass out shiravim, leftovers from a Rebbe's meal. There are some accounts that Hannah Rochel did all of this from behind a screen in order to preserve her modesty, but we cannot be sure because she had never married. She was called the Maid of Ludomir.
So she was like a real Rebbe. She had a little shul, and I had read that she would sit inside and talk through a window to men so that there would be kind of a mechitza or a barrier between them for modesty. Sometimes some say she did it from a screen, but I'd read that she did it through a window. But people came to her little shul or outside, and she was a Rebbe, basically. But then what happened? As her reputation grew, people flocked to Ludomir from all the region to procure her blessings, healings, and teachings. As she even performed miracles, Chana Rochel seemed to embody all the qualities of a Hasidic tzaddik, and acting as a bridge between God and the people, bringing God's love to the people and lifting them up to a higher spiritual plane. In her little green shul in the forest, she was an inspirational leader, a brilliant teacher, and a channel to the upper worlds. That is the classic definition of a Rebbe, that he is the bridge and the channel between the people and God. So that, and it doesn't say that only women came to her. So she had a Hasidic following for a while, I imagine, of men who came to study with her, and they respected her. And who knows what, I'd love to know what miracles, because I love when I hear about miracles. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. So I want to read the last paragraph, and then we'll discuss, and then we'll finish it next week. At first, Chana Rochel was tolerated as an eccentric and an oddity, but as her following expanded, the fiercely traditional male leadership of the Hasidic community became alarmed. They viewed her activities as a pathological manifestation of the powers of evil and impurity. They began to pressure Chana Rochel to abandon the life she had created for herself and resume her rightful female role and get married. Under the threat of excommunication, Chana Rochel capitulated, but her marriage lasted less than a week and was never consummated. After her divorce, Chana Rochel tried to resume her old life, but the Hasidic leadership had stirred up animosity against her, and her followers dwindled. So they destroyed her. They tried to destroy her. They tried to, force her to marry on the force of excommunication, which is a horrible fate for any Jew. No one talks to you. You're completely cut off from the community. The only famous person we know who was excommunicated was Spinoza. He was excommunicated, but he didn't care. He said, I don't care. I don't believe in any of this anyway. So it didn't affect him. But it would have devastated her to be cut off from the Jewish community. And they said, you have to give this all up and get married, that she's a manifestation of evil. That was how they felt about her, this beautiful woman. So who has comments or wants to say anything about it?
May I speak, Rabbi? They were jealous. Absolutely, totally.
They were jealous. But
and how dare a woman be more popular than men?
Right, and Peter, before I call on you, I have to think of the Megillah and Vashti, when the counselor said to Achashverosh, if the queen can disobey the king, then what are our wives going to do? They're going to disobey us. She was a threatening role model for other women who perhaps, and daughters who had yearnings to study. Panino, you were going to say something.
Again, I'm saying that the world around us also influenced what was happening. Look at the witches of Salem and Joan of Arc.
Very right.
Was
Yes.
supposed to
Joan
be,
of Arc, witches in Salem.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they were burned to the stake. So it's influenced by the world altogether. It's not. We are not unique in our things that happen to us or we do.
I agree, but I think what we're learning through these women is how much they offered, what we lost when we didn't know about them or they were stopped, and how our heritage is really much more powerful and smart and brilliant and talented than we ever imagined. That these women have been this, it's not like, women's lib or we got the vote and there was nothing before then, but we're talking about from Bruria. Well, actually, we go back to Miriam, Moses' sister even, and Deborah, the prophet, all the way, so far to this Hasidic Rebbe. 1 second, before I call on you, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or say anything else? Yes, Panina?
When it comes to miracles, I think that if you give a person a self-confidence that he can do it and he's worth it, a person himself could come up with pretty big miracles.
Herself
too. If you are told that you can do it and you believe in something and you make other people believe that they're worth something and they can do it, Miracles will happen.
I agree.
So,
So, okay, so I'm gonna wish you a nice week. And
yeah, and I recommend the book. It's called The Jerusalem Maiden. And I think you guys should read it. It's amazing. It's a fiction. It's about a woman who, in a very Orthodox family, who lived in Jerusalem under the Ottoman Empire.
Oh, I'm gonna look at that.
What's the author?
Unbelievable
Anina,
book.
what's the author's name?
I can't remember. A Jerusalem Maiden. If you tell them the name, they'll find it in the library.
Or you,
Thank you.
or on
In
Amazon.
Beechwood they do. I don't know about other libraries. I recommend it. That's
Thank
it.
you. All
Thank
right,
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
next
Susan.
week.
Thank you,
That
Rabbi.
was great.
Thank
We
you.
love you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
Wonderful
Thank
week.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Love
Thank
you.
you.
A peaceful one and a
Bye.
healthy one.
Thank you. And a healthy one. Bye.
Bye-bye.